5.5, 88.3 FM, ZJB Radio.
Good afternoon to our listeners, viewers, and members of the media. I am Director of Information and Communication, Fiona Alexander Smith. First of all, allow me to apologize for the delayed start in today's press conference. Welcome to the press conference with the Premier, Honorable Joseph E. Farrell. He will provide you with updates on developments across government of Montserrat. In terms of the format for today's press conference, the Premier will deliver a few remarks, and following that, the members of the media will be allowed an opportunity to ask questions. Please ensure that when someone else is speaking, your mic is muted so that we don't have persons speaking over each other. And additionally, please note that Zoom, which is the platform that we are using for the members of the media, Zoom allows you to indicate by raising your hand if you need to come back in to ask a question. At this time, I'll turn over to the Premier, Honorable Joseph E. Farrell, for his remarks.
Thank you, Fiona. Good day, everyone, including members of the press. Welcome to this press briefing.
Your mic is slightly off.
Welcome to this press briefing, in which I will update you on new developments since we last spoke. The island has not recorded any new cases of coronavirus since April 12, 2020. And this has provided the confidence for the continued opening of the economy. Let me also point out that tests have continued for persons traveling for medical reasons, including persons who are traveling to Antigua. And recently, Antigua have been asking for travelers or in-transit passengers to have tests done before they leave the island. And this is being facilitated through the Ministry of Health. In my moving around the island, it will appear that life is returning to normal. And the temptation would be to think that the coronavirus is a thing of the past. But we're reminded that it is very much active across the world. And it only takes one active case to put us back where we were some 14 weeks ago. The island simply cannot bear the strain of another lockdown. We're nearing the end of the phased reopening of the economy, and persons are moving around freely. As of yesterday, July 8th, those businesses and institutions which remained closed are now allowed to open, including our schools. The number of large gatherings has increased to 50, with the exception of the seaport and the airport, where passengers are allowed to embark and disembark. Neither does it apply to schools, funerals, and churches. In all these cases, as far as reasonably possible, physical distancing should be at least 6 feet, and face coverings should be practiced whenever you are in crowded areas. All ports of entry remain partially closed, allowing only for embarkation and disembarkation of certain categories of persons. In addition, persons who were allowed to enter the island under the old order, which ended on June 30th, this new order now provides for additional categories of persons to enter Montserrat, and they are as follows. A Montserratian, of course, a person who holds a permit of residence issued under Section 23 of the Immigration Act, a person who ordinarily resides in Montserrat, a person who owns a habitable or home in Montserrat, a husband, wife, child, or any dependent of a person. Bear in mind that interpretation of dependent person is given in the Act, and the immigration officers will determine and interpret that Act. This does not mean that any and anyone can come and claim to be dependent. The Act is specific as to who we classify as dependent relatives or friends. And also non-Montserratian resident technicians who has been granted permission to disembark and to work with institutions and businesses on Montserrat. A member of a crew of an aircraft or ship is also allowed to disembark in Montserrat. I must remind you that there is a strict mandatory 14-day quarantine period for everyone traveling to the island. And bear in mind that recently, Parliament had approved an increase in the penalty fees for persons breaking their quarantine. I wish to advise the public that Cabinet has also put in place a monitoring team to work with law enforcement agencies, thus ensuring that the measures which are put in place for the safety of the population are adhered to. Bus drivers and taxi drivers must adhere to face covering for themselves and their passengers while on a journey. Supermarkets, restaurants, bars, gyms, and other such entities must provide markings for social distancing in their establishment. And face covering in crowded areas should be practiced at all times. Aside from the COVID-19 suppression measures, phased reopening of the economy measures, the government of Montserrat has also been active in other areas during these weeks. The budget. On 18th June 2020, I presented the 2020-21 budget to the Legislative Assembly. As we all should be aware, the coronavirus pandemic has impacted the economies of the world, including the United Kingdom, and Montserrat is no exception. There is a projected shortfall of $22 million. And while these are projections, we hope to see some improvement in the revenue stream during the coming months. At the same time, we are still in discussion with DFID, and we are pretty sure that if the need arises, the shortfall, though small, will be met. I can assure the people of this country that there will be no cuts in the basic services which are offered by government. However, ministries and departments will be asked to be prudent in their spending over the next few months. In the meantime, we are working to expedite implementation of a couple of projects, such as the construction of the control tower, and to begin work as soon as possible on blocks L and M at the Montserrat Secondary School. During the lockdown, through a series of virtual meetings, the Ministry of Health has been in discussion with Article 25, the company tasked with providing the design for the hospital and advancing that piece of work even in the midst of the pandemic. Of course, we have all seen the major milestones for Montserrat's ITC recently, with the successful installation of the new submarine fiber optic cable system for Montserrat to the branching unit between Guadeloupe and Antigua. The project remains on track, and an end of August is in sight, ready for service. Additionally, on the ICT sides, the government of Montserrat will soon have a new website. The website rebranding team is available for information on this website. This will be a step in a positive direction and will pave the way for persons to access more services online and communicate with government ministries and departments, so as we see the government of Montserrat remains committed to advancing this island and doing the necessary work to ensure that Montserrat continues on a pathway to sustainable development. Over the past 3 months, government provided assistance to businesses, families, and individuals to assist them in weathering the storm during the shutdown and seeing them through those difficult times. Every aspect of the assistance may not have been perfect, but it achieved its set objective, which is to alleviate hardship and to stimulate economic activities during that period. I'm very pleased to see that some of the businesses are up and running, and some construction is taking place to provide some jobs for individuals at the same time. But government is also aware that some businesses will not be able to operate until later this year or early next year. And the business unit will be offering assistance in whatever form to ensure that we work together as government and business sector to get them operating again. I have been advised by the Minister of Health that a tentative timetable for the implementation of COVID-19 testing on Safefield GeneX platform, and that he will be in a position to give an exact date when testing will be done on island. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Premier. And at this point now, we'll open to questions from members of the press. To facilitate a smooth flow, I'll call the media house and you can identify yourself and proceed with your 3 questions. We'll start with Radio Montserrat.
Thank you very much, Fiona, and thank you very much, Honorable Premier James White Jr. from Radio Montserrat. And Honorable Premier, you mentioned the budget and you also mentioned the deficit. And you spoke to the fact that you're hoping that, things would improve in the coming months. What are some of the plans or systems that you've put in place to ensure that you'll be getting that return that you are looking for to aid the deficit or to service that deficit that you speak of?
Thank you, James. That's a very good question. I want to remind the press and the audience that budgets are estimates. And so you cannot be sure for certain that the figures are real figures. We believe that as a result of COVID, that there is going to be some level of shortfall in the budget. But as I pointed out, we are in discussion with DFID. But in addition, you will note that we will be having some savings on our expenditure for the months ahead. For instance, external travel for public servants will greatly reduce. So that in itself is going to bring some additional savings to the budget. And the other areas like these, where we will be experiencing some savings. And so, and if you notice, we notice also that although we predicted that, or projected that last quarter, the first quarter would have been bad, it is much better than we anticipated in terms of revenue. So we are optimistic, very optimistic, that there might be a shortfall, but we are not convinced that it will be in the order as expressed in the budget, providing we do not have another surge of COVID virus. If things continue as they are, and we don't have another surge, then we believe that the economy will perform much better than we anticipated, especially in quarter 3 and 4.
Okay, by way of follow-up, Honorable Premier, you spoke to prudence in spending. This would mean that the various departments and ministries would have to take into consideration prioritizing their spending. Has this been conveyed to the various accounting officers in the various ministries and departments?
The warrant has not yet been signed, so that money is not yet released. So there's no money to be spent right now. I'm hoping to sign the warrant by tomorrow, because I understand that the budget is to be signed off on this afternoon. Yes, that will be sent out. I think I saw a draft this afternoon on my desk. That will be sent out to accounting officers. But I want to reassure the public that they need not be panicked, because there's not going to be any cuts in the basic services. For instance, hospital where you have medication and other things is not going to be cut. Social service payments is not going to be affected. What we're asking public servants to do is to look at areas that they don't have to spend. Don't buy things that you don't need to buy. Be prudent in your expenditure. And in that way, we can in fact improve on our while we have some revenue savings, that will also reduce the size of the deficit. And so it's not that we're going to cut, but public servants has always been asked to be prudent in their expenditure, and don't buy things and don't hoard. Don't buy things for the sake of buying them, but buy just what you need. And as for instance, if you don't have to print material, don't print a lot of papers. Use your email system, use your whatever it is, and communicate to the public or through your colleagues. And these are some of the measures that we are talking about.
Okay, and before I allow somebody else to come in, the discussions that you are holding with DFID, the budget and its the shortfalls. I'm also looking at the stimulus, because you mentioned that you will be assisting or making provisions to assist businesses on island. What have you been talking with DFID about in terms of that stimulus support?
The public will recall that in communicating the message to them in early April, mid-April thereabout, we indicated that what we received from DFID was basically a first phase, because we anticipated that the pandemic would go on much longer. But fortunately for us, we have been doing fairly well in terms of managing the crisis, managing the virus. And so businesses are being able to open up much quicker than we expect. But what we note, and we did get some flack for that, but the tourism sector, for instance, there's no way that tourism, that hotels and guest houses and taxi drivers are going to be benefiting, are going to be up and running, because unless we open the borders, unless tourists start coming, which we don't see in short order, they will be out of jobs or out of finances. And so I've spoken to the AFS a few days ago, seeing whether we can in fact provide some assistance for this group of persons. I know it might be difficult because everybody would expect some assistance, but we are saying basically it is this sector which is hard hit the most that we are focusing as to whether we can. We certainly have no commitment from DFID on that, but we are working to see if we can in fact get through something to help them out. Because I'm seeing that the tourism sector is not going to be up before the end of this year or early next year. And that is the projection throughout the region. 18 months, as a matter of fact, is the period in which most of my OECS colleagues are being projecting that this tourism sector will be up again and running. Because cruise liners are not coming, people are not traveling. And once the coronavirus continues to spread in the US, for instance, and the UK, where most of our tourists come from, clearly traveling is going to be down. And so we have to see whatever we can do. And as I said, I'm going to allow the business unit within my department or my ministry to work along with those businesses to indicate to us what struggles they're going through. And together we can work to smooth things out.
Yeah, thank you very much, James White Jr. We'll now invite Discover Montserrat for her questions. Narissa Golden, Discover Montserrat, are you hearing us?
Premier, for those opening remarks.
Okay, I'm sorry, Narissa. We just heard your audio. You started before the mic was on, it seems. So if you can just please start your question again.
All right. Thank you, Premier. Could you tell us whether we are putting it in writing that a negative result is necessary for people to come into the island? Is that part of the process? And what sort of timeline do people have to have taken this test?
We have not said that a negative or a COVID certificate is required. That would be admirable. That would be a perfect case if that happens. And we would love for persons to come here with a COVID-free certificate. But even then, in this era in which we are operating, Nerissa, even those persons will come with a COVID-free certificate, we have to be very prudent in what we accept. And so the ministry is gearing up to be able to undertake testing, COVID testing. A rough timeline has been given to me by the minister, but I would prefer if he indicated to the public. But yes, we are working assiduously to ensure that we can do testing on the island. So we're not saying you must come with one, although that would be ideal. But we are positioning ourselves that if you get here after a certain date, you will be tested, or you can be tested. But bear in mind, at this point in time, there is still a mandatory 14-day quarantine period for every individual who's coming to Montserrat as of today or yesterday. And that will go on for some time until we're in a position to do a testing. So we're not asking them to come in COVID-free. We hope they do, but we admire that. But we are positioning ourselves to be able to test when they get here.
So would you say that you're banking on Antigua's provision that everyone should have a negative test before they get to Antigua as a sort of guarantee that the people coming through are COVID-free? What about if somebody were to come through on a charter or a boat? Well, boat, not boat, since we're not allowing entry by boats, but if I were to come in on a charter.
In as much as I would love to have Antigua as a air bridge or a travel bubble for us, that would be ideal. But we have to also take our own precautions here. And so we cannot depend solely on Antigua to give as passengers an okay for us. Because we know Antigua have a lot of travelers coming in. The testing regime, I'm not sure it's up to speed at this point in time. So I'm not sure. I think persons in transit to Montserrat will be sent on to Montserrat. I understand from the Antigua Authority that if you're traveling to Montserrat from another country, you'll be placed in quarantine, or if there's no direct flight to Montserrat at that time, you'll be placed in one of the quarantine hotels. And as soon as the first flight is available, you will come to Montserrat. So once you get here, we have to be ready to receive you, either to make sure you're going to quarantine, and follow up that, you will do a test. What I gather from the minister, and he is in a position to speak to it more, is that if you come here after a certain date, I think after this order is and a new order comes into being, then you will be placed in quarantine irrespective, and then test will be done. And if you're proven to be negative, the Ministry of Health will determine how long your quarantine stay will be. So it doesn't mean that you're not going to go in quarantine. It's just that the Ministry of Health will determine, having done your tests, and whatever it means, will determine how long an individual can remain in quarantine. So it could be 14 days, it could be less than 14 days, but it's a matter for the Ministry of Health to determine.
You mentioned earlier that the cabinet approved an increase in the penalty fees. What was the fee before and what is it now?
We recognize that we have to protect the health of our people. And we just can't allow persons who have been placed in quarantine to violate those quarantine rules and regulations and mingle with the public, exposing the public to the risk of it being infected by the person and with the virus. So in the old act, which was I think about 30, 40 years ago, the fee was $960, I think, something $960 something. And we have in the last sitting of the House, we have increased those fees to $2,000. It's a means of letting people know that we are serious. That when we tell you that you must remain in quarantine, you must not violate those quarantine provisions. And so we are ensuring, and if needs to be, and that's how I feel about it at this point in time. If we have to put further measures in place to ensure that persons remain in quarantine, we will do that. You cannot break your quarantine rules and infect other people in the community, putting additional pressures on communities and on government resources. So yes, $2,000 is the new fee.
All right, thank you. Fiona, is there a limit of how many questions you can ask? I have 2 more.
Yes, you could ask those, but what I would want is for the other media houses to get their 3 first, and then we come back around for your follow-up, all right? Thank you.
All right.
All
So
right.
I'll wait, thank you.
You're welcome. So the Montserrat reporter, you're next, Bennett Roach. Can you hear us? Are you online? And I'm getting an indication that your mic needs to be unmuted. So if you can, please unmute your mic. Mr. Roach, can you hear me?
Yes, are you hearing me now?
Yes, I am. So please proceed with your
Yes.
questions.
Yes, see, the problem is with my muted mic. Sometimes I get muted and I didn't mute it. And anyhow, I was saying that I will come at the end. I'll come after everybody.
Okay, all right. Well, since you've indicated that, we'll proceed to the other 2 media houses and we'll come back to you for your 3 questions. So, Ali Ogana Express, Malika Mackenzie.
Good afternoon and thank you. Thank you, Premier, for your introductory speech. I have a few questions and it's broken up into parts. My first question to you, with the US labeling the Cuban medical mission as forced labor in human trafficking, and with the introduction of a US bill to penalize countries that hired Cuban doctors through this mission, how worried are you that the pending mission of medical personnel to our island can affect Montserrat?
Could you just repeat it so I can digest the question a bit more, please?
Okay. So we're talking about the US labeling the Cuban medical mission as forced labor in human trafficking. And the US has just introduced a bill to penalize countries that hire Cuban doctors through this mission. How worried are you that the pending mission of medical personnel to our island can affect Montserrat?
Thank you very much. I cannot speak as a colony, a British colony, on the matter. I can speak as an OECS member on the matter. And OECS has taken a stance that the Cuban authority has been very helpful across the world in providing medical assistance, and that the OECS will be supporting Cuba's position. And they have in fact sent off a letter to the US Embassy indicating that Cuba's role in helping the work of COVID-19 is one that is appreciated by the member states. And so that is the position of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, and it is also the position of CARICOM.
Okay, follow up. According to the US TIP, which is Trafficking in Persons report, more than 20 nations have hired nearly 2,000 health workers in response to the coronavirus crisis under unclear financial arrangements. Have we finalized an arrangement with the mission group or the Cuban government on the terms of the visit? And can we, Montserrat, say that it does not fall in the category of unclear arrangements?
The arrangement for the Cubans to come here, initially, we wanted it to be an OECS matter. But clearly the UK has been involved, and they have looked over all of the documentation, and it must have met their own requirement in order for them to give us the okay to go ahead. So the UK is very, very much involved in any discussions that we are having with the Cubans and the Organization of the Caribbean State. And if it displeases them, then certainly they will not agree to it. But the latest position I received is that the Cubans are all set to come, and the UK have not objected to that position.
Okay, and my question, with the new COVID-19 medical equipment on island, will we be conducting our own tests on the Cuban medical personnel?
I think the Ministry of Health has indicated to the authorities in Cuba exactly what is expected of them before they arrive here. And so that is much as I can say to that. And I believe that the Ministry of Health would have further information. But I think that there's a protocol already established for the Cubans before they arrive.
Thank you. Can I ask my second question, or do I wait, Fiona?
Okay, let's take from. Is it a follow-up?
No,
Okay,
it's a totally different question.
right. So you just asked your 3 questions, or not? You asked 2 questions.
Okay, so I'm
if
gonna
I'm
ask you.
right. So
Okay.
ask
So
the 3rd one, and then we'll go to DS Media, and we'll come back for the follow-ups. All right?
so you're saying that you're going to DS and then come back to
No, I'm saying ask your question. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll go on. Premier, what does the merging of the FCO and DFID mean for Montserrat in terms of funding and our development strategy? And the follow-up to that will be being aware. Okay.
Could you hold the follow-up and let me do the first part, please? Because
Yes.
it's not a straightforward answer that I have for you on this one. I'm still trying to figure out, for want of a better word, the pros and cons of such a merger. Some of us understand the history long ago between FCO and DFID. And clearly, what we have here is 2 agencies, one responsible for aid and the other responsible for constitutional matters. And what I gather is that the people with aid doesn't have anything to do and sometimes don't care much about the constitutional matters. And on the other hand, the people who are responsible for the constitutional matters do not have the finances. And let me draw an example. FCO, Montserrat falls directly under the FCO. But the FCO has no financing to give to Montserrat in any way. Although we are a colony, although we are British. They have nothing to give us. Aid comes from DFID at the discretion of DFID, who is really an aid agency and has nothing to do with constitutional matters. So I'm yet to determine the pros and cons. I am seeking information. I have spoken to the governor on the matter, and I've spoken to Alan, the guy, FCO matter, Alan, I'm trying to get his name, Alan Pike, who's FCO on the matter. Basically, I'm concerned with the structure, because when the structure is developed, then we can understand exactly who report to when it comes to aid and who I report to in terms of constitutional matters. And that will only be finalized sometime in September, I understand. So at the moment, I am not in a position. I'm for it or against it. I'm basically on the information drive, and I'm trying to put things together. And hopefully, things will come clearer nearer to September, and I'll then be in a position to tell you what I think is the advantage of that merger.
Okay. And my follow-up would be, being aware of the agenda of FCO, one being same-sex marriage, do you see our funding tied to any such condition or conditions in the future?
I am prepared to deal with that matter when I cross the boundary. At this point in time, I'm not sure I have any information as relates to that. So let's wait until we get there and determine how we move forward with that.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you, Fiona.
You're welcome, Malika. So we'll move on now to DS Media. Dwight Sampson, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, V. Good afternoon, Honorable Premier, and all of my colleagues.
Good afternoon.
Premier, I must say, thank you so much for coming back to us in the media and having this conversation with us and keeping us up to date and abreast as to what your government is doing in response to this whole COVID-19 situation, even as we are on the back end. I have one question for you, and this question is relating to somewhat to what James asked in relations to reduce spending with the deficit, the budget deficit. You mentioned that there would be cuts, and you said you will be asking ministries and departments to reduce their spending.
Let me correct you. Let me correct you on that one before we get into it. I'm not saying there are cuts. What I say, I'll be asking the department and ministries to be prudent in the expenditure. That doesn't mean cutting. That means just manage your expenditure so you can have enough money to spend. So I just want to get clear that cut is different to prudent spending.
Okay,
no, right.
Fine, granted. Thank you so much for that. But do we expect any form of cutting that's why I was actually going with that, because it seems that like some public servants is of the opinion that they're going to be cutting in terms of maybe job loss or whatever the case may be. Can you alleviate that fear?
I have absolutely no information on cutting of jobs. I have no information on cutting. What I'm working with is that we might have a deficit, and we are trying as best as we can to minimize the impact of that deficit on the population. I'm not sure where information on cuts coming from. I certainly have no information on cuts.
Okay, thank you so much, Premier. Follow-up question: has the Budget Appropriation Act gone before the governor for signing as yet?
I have a weekly meeting with the governor. On Tuesday afternoon, I inquired, and I was assured by the governor that there are a number of papers on his desk, and that they'll be signed today. So hopefully I'll be able to sign the warrant sometime tomorrow, to provide for expenditure to start sometime next week.
Okay, thank you so much. V, I'll ask my other questions in the second round. Thank you so much, V. Thank you so much, Premier.
Welcome.
You're welcome. Now we'll move on to the Montserrat reporter, Mr. Roach. Are you available to ask your questions at this point?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to good afternoon to everybody there in Montserrat. Good to be here. Listen, Premier, my very first thing is what's bugging me and a few other people. Is it the financial secretary who makes the policy, except carrying out the policy of government regarding finance?
Is that, repeat again, please, Mr. Roach?
Is it the financial secretary who makes the policies, or is it the government, yourself as the Minister of Finance, who makes the financial policies, and that the financial secretary carries out those policies?
You basically answer the question. Policies are made in cabinet, and the technicians implement those policies. So you basically answer the question yourself. Yes, cabinet put policies in place, and the various technicians, such technician is the FS, and they do in fact try and implement those policies.
Well, you see, Premier, you said a little while ago, I can't remember the exact word, which I could, and which I written down, where you actually said you are going to check with the financial secretary as to something that needs to be done.
Point of correction, I said point of correction, I said I'm in discussion with the FS, because clearly, when I'm drafting a policy, the economic team and financial team must do the research work, put that paper together to come to me to the cabinet. So I cannot for any reason avoid speaking to the FS, to the economic team, to the financial teams within the Ministry of Finance, to technicians within my own ministry. All of these persons come together to help to formulate a policy based on directive from the ministers. So in this case, I am talking to the FS, I am talking to the economic team, and we will determine exactly what we think is feasible to approach DFID on. Having done that, the paper I will then take a policy paper to cabinet, and that will be sent on to DFID for action. And that's how it works.
The relief package and support package that you provided and offered to the people, to the businesses and the people of Montserrat. Before I continue, Premier, did you listen or have you heard the Chancellor of the Exchequer speak in London yesterday?
I heard a briefing this morning as to how much he's going to put forward and the number of programs, yes. So?
Yes, okay, so I'll come back to that. Regarding that package, there was, I think, admitted by yourselves in the House, etc., that there was some cock-ups with that. Why has nothing been done, as far as I know, about fixing those cock-ups so that that matter can be concluded and dealt with?
Could you repeat? You're cutting out a little bit. We missed a few words.
I'm so sorry. Yes. I think, as I said, through the House and elsewhere, there's been admission as to some cock-ups regarding the relief and the support that has been given to the businesses throughout the COVID period. Why is it that nothing has been done to fix and correct some of those problems that ensued from the rolling out of that package?
To the best of my knowledge, there was one oversight in the package. The package was implemented as presented, approved by cabinet and presented to DFID and approved by DFID. We learned earlier that there was later on that there was one oversight where businesses with less than 5 employees were not receiving assistance, and that was based on the overall wording of the document. We subsequently, and if you are following us, we subsequently modified that so that in addition to the persons who were getting 80% of their salaries, for employees were getting 80% for their staff, persons with less than 5 staff members were also, and they also claim, and I have evidence of that, claim for their staff members and receive assistance for their rent, the insurance, their utility bills. That was fixed and that was implemented, and persons have received under that amendment to the package.
Well, I can't call names, but I have to. I can't call names, but I have to say that's not being entirely correct, Premier. Maybe you need to get some more information, because I am telling you that I know of people who have not yet benefited and who are suffering as a result from the relief package. And that thing that you mentioned about the rent and utility bills and so on is something that came after. But as far as I know, some of the first phase of the package was not done. Neither was this taken care of.
But may I say here, may I say here that there are always 2 sides to a story and maybe 3 sides to a story. And there are persons, and I trust people to be honest and truthful, and I'm in no way saying that that's not the case. But there are persons who under what provision, how did they apply? Because what we found out is that in the very early stages of the crisis, the trade unit went out and did a risk assessment of businesses. And what I gather is that there were persons who assume that process was a form of application, and it wasn't. And so if they had come back, they hadn't received their assistance, and they'd come back to the unit and say, but look, we have not receiving. Many of them have been guided back to the Ministry of Finance or to Social Services. So yes, there was this misunderstanding or mix-up, but that is rectified. And another point I want to raise here is that there are persons who are claiming that they have not received, but some have just not applied. And if you didn't apply for any assistance, then clearly you will not receive. And thirdly, if you applied and they were not able to verify the information that you presented, clearly you won't receive anything, but you would be directed to another source to get assistance. So everyone, with certain exemptions, were entitled to receiving some form of assistance from this package. That was my position, that still is my position, and if it didn't happen, we will want to know those persons who didn't benefit, providing that they were able to verify, that the ministry was able to verify their claims.
Premier, I really, this is something that I would have to, I won't go into the back and forth on that, because I know differently from what you're saying. I know differently from what you're
please
saying.
let us know, so that at least we can help.
Yes, I will, but as I said, that's not going to be done here. And I've tried to communicate with you on that, but I've seen no acknowledgement of that.
Hold on. Let me clear this, Mr. I don't want the public to believe that as Premier, I don't respond to persons. We have had long discussions over weeks, back and forth. I asked you for certain information. And I noticed yesterday you sent me an email and this morning. And I'm not sure that there's much more I could tell you on that, because we have had several bits of WhatsApp messages back and forth. So I don't want to give the public the impression that the Premier wasn't answering and responding to your requests. Please.
Premier, as I said, I will not argue on this.
Okay.
On the matter of the reason I asked you about the Chancellor of the Exchequer's presentation yesterday is your about the businesses of Montserrat. Closing the borders as we have, the Montserrat borders as we have, whereby people will have to be on quarantine, for example, to get into Montserrat for 14 days, visitors, everybody. I see you have completely locked down whatever trickling of tourism that can take place, having opened the place for business. I noticed you mentioned a little later that you didn't think that tourism would be on the ball until next year. True, we're entering the summer months, and that's not a popular thing for Montserrat. But whatever trickling that we might even have is completely shut down. Also, you stated, sir, about the region as far as the tourism was concerned. That was the information you have. The information I have by joining with tourism discussions hosted by you, UWI, etc., is that the region is excited about getting back into the tourism market and believe that the region will benefit even more and quicker than many other places, because the Caribbean can boast that they've had a fairly good passage through the COVID crisis. So I'm not understanding why we are completely making it so difficult, even criminalizing the situation to bring people into Montserrat.
We are not criminalizing the situation. We are simply saying that there is a phase reopening of the economy. And as of yesterday, we are almost towards the end of the opening. And the last aspect of that opening will be the borders. But the borders will only be open when we are in a position to protect our people through testing. If we cannot test, then we cannot allow masses to come in, and people who we're not sure are free to come in. So there's no way we are preventing tourists from coming in. We are simply phasing in the arrivals into Montserrat so that we can manage the arrivals and manage the disease still. Because COVID-19 is not out of the woods. We are not out of the woods with it. We are still very much, it's still very much around. And I understand it from you what you're saying, because I've been sitting in meetings, and there's some countries in the region who's heavily dependent, their budget is heavily dependent on tourism, some 80%, and they have had a serious blow during the crisis, and they're doing everything possible now to ensure that they can get back to speed. Fortunately for Montserrat, even though we depend on some level of tourism, our budget is not totally and not heavily dependent. And that is why some countries are pushing hard. And I don't want to call names of countries because I sit in meetings, and just this morning there was a meeting on, and we're pushing hard to have their borders open. But they are still putting in place protocols. Protocols for the airline, protocols for hotels, protocols for the cruise liners. And my understanding that cruise liners will not be coming here before either late December or early next year. So we are putting in place protocols, and we do have in place protocols for arrivals. But if you look at the order that came in yesterday, we have increased the categories of persons. Homeowners, persons who have homes here and who can show us that they have a home here, or persons who are coming here and can show us that they can safely live with somebody and be isolated. We have done that. And so we are not shutting off Montserrat because of tourism. The borders still remain partially closed. And that's what I said a while ago. Partially closed because we have increased the category of persons who we are allowing into Montserrat. And it must be managed. If we don't manage it, we're going to be going back to square one. And shut down is not what we want again. We do not want to get there again. The people of Montserrat cannot go through another mental stress with COVID-19. So we have to do everything possible as a government to ensure that we keep the people safe.
Still on people arriving in Montserrat, you mentioned about the categories of people who could come in, etc., without what I call visa style requirements. Dependents, why leave the dependent thing to the discretion of the immigration officers, rather than simply describe who can be such a dependent and what, or who can be that dependent that be admitted in. The scenario is, Premier, is that somebody can bring in some dependent, and when they reach Montserrat, the immigration officer say, well, they would have to say, according to my discretion, you don't fit the criteria. How does that?
I urge everyone to go on the Montserrat website and look at the new order, because I think it stipulates who dependents are. I just didn't take the time to include it in my opening remarks, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the order spells out exactly who your dependents should be. Because what we don't want is for you to pick up, to use a colloquial term, to somebody to pick up Tom, Dick, and Harry and bring them here saying that they are related. A dependent is somebody who depends on you for their well-being, for their survival. They live with you, a child, an elderly person. This sort of thing, if I'm not mistaken, is in the act. It's in the order, sorry. So I think the order is clear. And the officers, immigration, will have that order. And there's an act which stipulates exactly who they are. And they must be familiar, if the immigration officers, who those persons are.
So you say it's spelled out. So really, and
some of it is spelled out in the act. I just didn't take time to include it in my opening remarks.
It's how you said it, Premier. That caused me to.
I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry.
You said it was left to the. You say it is left to the discretion of the.
I'm sorry I did that, but it does in fact. It's in fact included in the.
So that clears that.
Yeah.
Premier, the fiber optics. I think I'm getting into my third question. But before I leave that, because testing is involved in this. Didn't we get testing equipment sometime in April from you?
Yes, and I did say at the end. I did say at the end of my my opening remarks that the minister have informed me that they have a tentative schedule as to when they are going through some tests now on those machines. They have a GNX and a GP, another one, and they're now running experiments on it. And by a certain time this month, they will be able to offer tests. But I leave the exact date to the ministry and the minister to let the public know exactly when they will be offering that. I don't want to speak out of turn, but we do have the machine. They have been certified. Someone came in from someplace last week or the other week. It's been certified. It's being set up, and they're running tests right now and experiments, and they will be able to offer tests. And that is why we are synchronizing opening of the borders with being able to offer tests on the island.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Roach. We'll now,
No.
Mr. Roach, we're going to come back to you. You would have gone over the 3 for this round, so we're going to come back to you if we are to continue. All right? So we will start again with Radio Montserrat and have them asked, if there's another burning question that has not already been covered, you can follow up with that question. But just for greater clarity, the SRNO specifies dependents as the spouse, the child or stepchild under the age of 18 years of age, an adopted child under the age of 18 years, having been adopted by the Montserratian or the resident of Montserrat, legally adopted, that is, and a person who is a relative of such person and is financially dependent on such person. So the SRNO 44 of 2020 does specify who would be classified as dependents.
Thank you for the assistance. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Premier. Mr. White, James White Jr.
Thank you very much, V. Premier, I see you laughing, but that's okay. I've received a number of WhatsApp messages prompting me to ask the question. I remember the last time we spoke, and I asked the question about frontline workers and if there is any compensation. And you said that you were working on something. They are pressing me to ask you, what is the situation now?
I have no firm answer on that question, and be honest, and I will be honest. If you're sitting where I sit, the number of persons who are claiming what some call hazard pay and paying for frontline workers is out of this world. How do you start? I certainly appreciate the work that has been done by those frontline workers. It's not an understatement. Certainly appreciate the work they have been doing. They have done in the crisis. Some have exposed themselves and their families, and we certainly appreciate as government. But where do I start? Where do we start? A number of statutory bodies and government institutions are asking for payment, and it complicates the system. It complicates the system because the moment you start, and I must be very frank here, the moment you start offering one assistance, politically, it's political suicide. And I must be clear, I'm conscious of that. We are still working on some methodology where we can provide some assistance, it may not be cash, and especially, let me be honest with you, especially those persons, and I expose myself to the risk of being castigated for this, especially persons who manage the flu clinic, those persons who manage the quarantine facility, those persons who are taking swabs, those maids who are cleaning the floors at the quarantine unit, and those others who carry the food in. These are high risk. People expose themselves to the risk of contracting the virus. And initially, I thought that this was the only group that would have been requesting some assistance, but unfortunately, it is not. And so it puts us in a bind, and especially, we have a deficit. So you see my position. It's very difficult. But we will continue to see what we can do for some groupings.
Because I was going to say, Honorable Premier, that it would be difficult if there is to be a second wave of sorts to get these people to literally bend over backwards.
No, Mr. White. No. I'm not saying that, and I will not go on that route because we all have a call to a service. And whereas I appreciate the sacrifice that some people have made, let's face it, we are called to do a job. And yes, some people have gone beyond the call of duty, and we appreciate that. But others of us have been working during the crisis, and we love what we're doing. So we do the job not because of remuneration, but because we love what we're doing. We are called to do it, and we get pleasure in doing it and doing it well. So I understand, but at the same time, don't let me preach this one.
Yeah, I hear you, Honorable Premier, but I know that they're not taking it as how you're saying it.
No, but I will want to talk to them, to be honest, and I'm sure they will understand eventually where we're coming from.
Yeah, so we'll not go any further on that one. Okay, so back to the whole issue of COVID-19, and I really would have loved to have the Minister of Health on this one, but I suppose that you can speak a little bit on it. There is a notice from the Ministry of Health which says people who are leaving Ireland or who intend to leave must do this sampling, this COVID test before they go, like days before they travel, if they're intending to travel within 7 days. And Antigua, the cabinet there has included Montserrat in their travel bubble. Has there been any discussion with you on this, the government of Montserrat, on this?
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Every country has the right to introduce protocols to protect their state and their population. And Antigua is saying that they do need a test for persons traveling into Antigua. Without divulging any privileged information, I'm in contact with Antigua. We have made written submissions to Antigua, and so we are working with them, and I'm certain that we'll have a positive response from Antigua. For this week and next week, I can't guarantee the person traveling public that will come to an end, but I'm almost certain that we will have a solution, because as I said a little earlier, the OECS have established ourselves because we have very low cases of COVID within the region, and we have already established a travel bubble between all the OECS states. So we can travel right now. We can travel to each other's countries without a certificate and without tests. Antigua, quite rightly, the medical team must give advice to cabinet, and that's the right. But I'm waiting some word, and I'm confident that I will get some positive word from Antigua for us to travel through.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Honorable Premier. My third question, there are many others, but I would want to throw this one into the mix now. And it has to do with LIAT and all the discussions that we've been hearing regarding LIAT and who wants to see LIAT go where and so on. And the impending liquidation of LIAT is what we are looking at. Now, whereas the other shareholders have not come out in favor, basically, of a resurgence of LIAT. The Antigua-Barbuda Prime Minister has been, taking the lead in ensuring that the regional airline survives. We've heard of 42-seaters and twin otters, and I'm going down the road where access is concerned and connectivity, because Antigua right now is our hub in terms of us getting to wherever else in the world. Has the government of Montserrat been in any discussion at all with Antigua-Barbuda as far as this is concerned?
And the short answer is no. But let me elaborate.
And why not?
Let me elaborate a little bit on that. I sat in 2 meetings last Monday and last Friday discussing LIAT. It's a contentious issue in CARICOM and OECS right now, contentious. Contentious in the fact that the major stakeholders, the major shareholders are not willing, and my colleague, Prime Minister Brown, would have said that. They're not willing to put any more money into LIAT. But they're asking for LIAT 1974 to be liquidated. Clearly, LIAT has served the region well, and none of us would want to see LIAT go under. But if shareholders, and it's a business, and if shareholders are of the view that a business is no longer viable for them, they will then withdraw their shares, as this case is. As related to Montserrat, we do not have a share in LIAT at this point in time. We had a small share, and that was retracted some time ago. So you will note that when it comes to voting as to whether LIAT go in and out, I sit on the meetings, but I don't have a vote on that. But I introduced some topics while I was at the meeting. And I did, in fact, indicated that Montserrat has been thrown out of LIAT since when, or left LIAT. And for the past 25 years, none of my colleagues, and I said it to them very clearly, none of you, my colleagues, be it CARICOM or OECS, have ever considered us and asked how we are faring in terms of access. We have been fighting for ourselves, and I've said that to them in the meeting. But I say, however, we are in the process of seeking access to Twin Otter, and our airport was constructed for that. And let me be clear, if the Honourable Prime Minister can come up and salvage LIAT and introduce some Twin Otters into the package, into the mix, clearly we will start talking to them, because we are going out to spend money. Right now we are going out for interest, expressive interest for Twin Otters. And if my colleagues in the region can show me that they can provide Montserrat with a link through a Twin Otter, I will start speaking to them along that line. But until then, there's really no need to speak to them until they can assure me that, yes, Twin Otter is in the mix, yes, you can be part of us, and my government will get into it and start talking. But until then, there's very little I can do in terms of talking, because Antigua myself alone doesn't make sense for us to talk alone. We have to talk as a group, as a regional grouping, and that's my position. And so that's my government's position as well.
Yeah, we have to continue to keep the conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you, James. Now, to Discover Montserrat and Arissa Golden, if you have a burning question that you were not able to ask or the others haven't asked.
Okay, thank you. Premier, I noticed in your budget there was no projects related to stimulating the private sector. And given the current climate that we are in, what plans do you have for adding projects or other sorts of support to stimulate private sector growth? You did identify ICT as an area with potential. Do we have any actual programs that we can look forward to see some development in this area?
It's thank you, Nerissa. It's still early days for my government. 3 months have lost because of COVID, and we are working on ICT because we see ICT as a stimulus for Montserrat. We can, and now that the fiber optics is in place, we are going to be using, going to marketing Montserrat as a place, a destination where persons can come and work. In terms of other projects, the Ministry of Comes and Works, who is responsible for ICT to a certain extent, and DITES, they're working closely together, and sooner or later we will be having some information. As you know, we're not able to develop projects right now. We have ideas on projects, but what we are doing right now is that we're implementing what we have in front of us. And while we are doing that, then we are discussing with our funding partners and the private sector. And I want people to understand that, and I repeat it time and time again, and I'm never tired of saying that. Montserrat will never develop if we're depending on aid. The private sector must come forward. And I expect Montserrat private sector to come forward and make suggestions. Let's enter into partnership as best we can, be it for housing, be it for developing other projects. Let's come together as a country. For too long, we have been out there, and it's government and the private sector needs to play a role. And we will never advance beyond this handout situation until we start working together as a country to build the country. And so, yes, we haven't had any, there's no project I could identify new ones, but we are working on some aspect of it.
All right, thank you. One more question as it related to your support. You mentioned tourism sector being, I suppose, the hardest hit by the situation. Are there any plans to extend for, let's say, another 3 months, any financial support that those people who are directly affected by the lack of travel to benefit?
We are in the process of negotiation, because I am concerned that sector is not going to make it for the next couple of months. Exactly what will be available, I prefer to continue discussion and then get back to the public and say this is what we have, this is what we can offer. So I'll get back to the public once something is coming forth.
All right, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nerissa. Aliogana Express, do you have another follow-up question that you would like to ask at this point?
Yes. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Premier. Premier, I just need some clarity on one of my questions. Did you say that the UK is handling the missions for Cuba, or has Montserrat taken over handling the mission? And when you answer that, I have just the follow-up.
We're working together because we started off as an OECS mission. And OECS, we thought that OECS and us would have been would have tied on the agreement. But along the way, the UK wanted to be involved. They wanted to, and clearly, they didn't want a territory to be signing on to an agreement, and they don't know what is in it. So they have been involved in it. The agreement has been sent to London for tweaking a few times. It's back, and it's now with London still, and we're waiting for final draft. We have given the understanding, though, that they are in favor of it, because I've spoken to Baroness Sogg on a number of occasions on that. I spoke to the governor on a number of occasions on it as well, and I'm convinced that the UK is in on it, and that we will be getting the team. Clearly, we are a colony, and you understand where I'm getting what. And foreign affairs matter, those kind of matters does not rest solely with the government of Montserrat. It's an FCO matter, because it's foreign affairs, and which falls directly under the governor once it's not under the OECS and CARICOM treaty that we have.
Okay. So will we be screening these Cuban medical personnel for indicators that they are here of their own free will, without cohesion or force, to ensure that we protect our country from any participation in human trafficking scheme?
I am not sure about human trafficking. If you follow the history of Cuba and the Cuban commander team, they have been going across the world. And they've been doing a fantastic job. And I make no bones about it. I've done my research. They have gone to Asia. They have gone to Europe. They were in Italy, as a matter of fact, very early in the crisis, helping them to manage. So when it comes to human trafficking, I don't know what aspect of that any other foreign power is talking about. I simply know that they are humanitarian, that they have gone about helping people to do their work, and those of us who follow history understand the dynamics at play here. And I'll rest it there.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Fiona.
You're welcome. DS Media, do you have a final question that you'd like to ask before we close?
Thank you so much, Fiona. Yes, I do have a final question. Premier, afternoon again. I continue to note the absence of health officials, including the Minister of Health, at press conferences like these. He has not been present for the last press conference we had with you, and possibly the one before, if my memory serves me correct. But in the absence, can you provide an update on the social services payout package? I know that in the budget presentation, actually, let me commend you on the budget presentation so far, even with the deficit. You mentioned that some persons still have not received payments. We have received information that some persons have gotten 2 months payout as one, as well as some persons are still waiting. Do you have any update on that, Premier?
Let me first of all, let me tackle the first part. In defense of the minister and minister, the minister have had press briefings on a number of occasions, but there comes a time when we have to give way to the technicians. We understand that, for instance, I used to give a weekly press briefing. I have no need to do that now because we're no longer in crisis mode. If I was in crisis mode, I would be here every Wednesday talking to the public. But I've scaled back on my briefings because it's no longer critical or crisis. And so the minister have in fact allowed his technicians, and if I'm not mistaken, 2 of them they were on air last week, explaining to the public. The truth is they were on the health promotion show. But at the same time, that is part of government's mechanism in promoting and giving information. So if persons didn't hear that, it's unfortunate. But the ministry is still out there giving out information. And I urge the people of Montserrat to listen to that show on Wednesday afternoons and get information, because it's part of government mechanism. Just like the GIU, listen to the GIU, listen to Radio Montserrat, listen to Health Promotion Unit, because they all bring information from government to the public. And so yes, so let's go back to the substantive part of your question. I said to you and everyone, if you know of persons who have not yet received assistance, please forward those names to myself or the Ministry of Finance, and we will deal. If you're absolutely sure that they have not received, please, because it's not our intention for anyone to suffer in this situation. Yes, you say there are persons who receive to pay because, for want of repeating myself, we are aware that early in April there are some persons who applied online, and there was a problem with the email system. And so what social services did was to pay some persons 2 months, which is April and May, and June might be still coming. I know there are persons who receive all. So just like a patient, and if you have not received your 3rd month payment, please just give a nudge someplace, and to myself, to other persons in the Ministry of Health or in the Ministry of Social Services, or the Ministry of Finance, and we will seek to remedy the situation as far as we can. But it's not intentional. There's no way that we intend for persons to suffer. And it's unfortunate if some people have been suffering. I'm very apologize for that. But, let us know. Let us know.
All right.
Okay. Final question. Sorry, Dion, I just want to ask this final question. In terms of the Cuban medics that would be coming to the island, what role will they be filling on island in terms of assistance? Of course, we don't have COVID cases or any of that anymore. So what role would they be filling? Do you have that information, Premier?
I would prefer for the Ministry of Health to do that, but we have a small nursing staff and the medical team who have been stretched beyond measure. And certainly any relief, it's true that we don't have any COVID case or any known COVID case, let me put it that way. But it will bring some level of relief to those nurses and doctors and other persons who have been at the fore of this crisis for the past 12 weeks and beyond, and even before that. Because we do have a shortage in our nursing and medical staff. And I think that is one reason. But the Ministry of Health will be in a position to give you a little more detail. So do give them a call, and I'm certain that they will answer your question.
Thank you so much, Premier. Thank you so much, Fiona.
You're welcome. Now, the Montserrat reporter, Bennett Roach, your final question as we get ready to close off today's press conference.
My third question from the first section. Just very quickly though, on that Cuban thing that Dwight and Milika have been asking about, is there any cost to us with these folks coming to Montserrat, other than maybe putting them up in Montserrat?
Yeah, there's a cost to Montserrat. They're professionals. We asked for them. And as I said early on, we really expected that COVID would have had cases going on beyond. But we have an agreement, and we must go through. There will be some cost involved, as other countries do. But yes, there's a cost to it.
Okay, you see, Premier, just that very last thing that you just said, it sounds as if, well, right now we don't need them. But
no, I'm not saying that, Mr. Roach. I'm not saying that. Okay,
but anyway, I'm telling you what I can infer from what you're saying, but inferences are not necessarily what is. I only mention that because if we have a cost that we are going to be meeting for these people who are coming at this stage when there's no real urgent need for them, maybe you can be using some of that cost to really make the nurses and those people on the forefront feel happy. Just a thing. I don't need an answer from you. I'm just saying that. The question that I wanted to ask about, and thanks to James for bringing up that late matter. I wish that we were in a setting that we could have really talked more about it, that late position. Because Montserrat, I think, should have a serious input in what is going on, because what happens in Antigua is important to us as far as LIAT and travel airline services to Antigua is concerned. Is important to Montserrat. It's true we are few and small, but it's very important to us. My question is fiber optics. I noticed that you said something about, last time we spoke on this, I understood that there was nothing yet in place for the service providers in Montserrat to access the upgraded and new and great facility that we are about to put in, and that's on the ground at the moment. Where are we about that? Because without them, is it that the government going to manage this whole thing and then so that the rest of us can benefit from it? Or we are going to be depending on Flow, Digicel, and anyone else who might come?
My understanding is that service providers, we have to enter into negotiation, discussions with service providers. And I'm planning to meet with service providers sometime in the future, because they're the ones who have to buy, because it's not going to be free. The service provider will have to be able to buy some service from the parent company and distribute to their clienteles. So we have not yet had that discussion, but within my ministry, within my department, my ministry, I think last week or the other week, we had some discussion as to the way forward. And so, yes, we are planning to meet with those service providers to find exactly what they expect and what they can take from the service. You're right, and they will have to distribute to the general population, not government, definitely not government.
And who's the parent company you just referred to?
I'm not quite sure I could get that information for you, I know the company who is installing it. I think that I will ask the DITES director to, if I knew that question was coming, I would have walked with him or alerted him to stand by. But I will get that information to you. But clearly, it is the local service providers who's going to be are going to have to distribute to the people on Montserrat who use the service.
No, from me, I don't think you understood my question. You referred to the service providers dealing with the parent company. I thought the parent company was going to be the government of Montserrat.
Well, it could be. We are DITES. DITES is really. I think DITES is the one who is the lead on it. So if that's the case, they'll have to talk to DITES. But I have to verify it because, to be honest, I'm honest with you, I'm not sure if you have decided who is going to manage the thing from a government standpoint. It could be DITES, it could be another agency. I don't know that yet. We have not gone into the details. Now that we have had the connections and that some aspect of it, and you will note that there's another area that we're not fully loaded, because there's some area that's not going to be connected to the fiber optic as we speak. But that's another matter that we'll deal with later. But I will have I will seek an update from the DITES, direct DITES, and verify it in another meeting with you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roach. Premier, your final comments as we wrap up today's press conference.
Thank you, Fiona. I certainly appreciate the questions and the interaction from the press, and they're sharper today than before. Thank you very much, press, for the press corps. I know you're very sharp today, and I love that. And your questions have been forthcoming, and they are pointed. And I promise you, I will come to you. I'm not afraid afraid of you. If I have the answers, I'll give you. If I don't have the answers, I'll tell you. I'll get back to you. And for any reason, give me a call. You don't have to wait for a press conference. I know that one or two of you have been saying that we are not accessible, but we are accessible as ministers. But do give me a call, and if it's a question that you have to answer and I don't have to come for a press conference, do give me, or call Fiona, and I'm sure she'll get it to me because she knows exactly how to get to me. So once again, thanks for coming, thanks for taking part, and Fiona, thank you very much, and I look forward for the next session press briefing. Thank you.